Okay, so now that we've um, put all of the comparisons in here that we need to have, we want to do some district analysis. So first I'm going to um, uh, freeze panes up there. I want to leave the first row of visible, the first row with calculations in it, because that way it makes it more easier to edit the calculations later. So there you go. The next thing we need to do is we need to place all this data into districts. So we're going to use a function called vlookup. It's a really useful function. I use it so often. So here's how you do it. You hit equals sign and you type vlookup, and Excel can tell that that's what you want, and it starts to give you some clues about it. It says that you're going to need a lookup value. What we're going to look up is number 1. Then we're going to go over here to TAS 2009, and you can see that it's changed the tab location there. I'm going to highlight these cells, A through D, and then I'm going to hit comma, and it's going to look up the same number here, 1, and return whichever column I want it to return. So in this case I want it to return northwest, or I want it to return the 4th column, so I'm going to put 4 in there, and then false, which just means don't interpolate the data, make exact matches. So then when I come back to here, I can see that I do have it popped in there as to what it was. Now when I hit that down, it's going to then associate everything with a district, except for apparently unused zones, zone ranges that aren't being used. So that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and title that district, and the next thing I want to do is do a district analysis or data reduction, and I'm going to use a pivot table to do that. So to do that, you go to the Insert tab, and then there's Pivot Table here. So click on the little pull down arrow and you're going to choose Pivot Table. It automatically highlights all of the data for you, and that is the data that I want to do a pivot table on. So I'm going to say OK, and I'll put it into a new worksheet and say OK. So now it's created a new worksheet. I'm going to place it over here, and I'm going to call it Piv, just so that I know that it's my pivot table. Now when I click inside the pivot table, it shows all of these fields over here that I could summarize in some way. So I want to summarize by district, so I'm going to take the district and grab it and drag it down into the row labels spot. Row means it's going to set it up like this. Next I want to know, well, I can know anything about this. I want to know maybe how many households are in 2010, so I drop it over here to values. It does sum. Sometimes it might do count, and the way you change that is you click on the pull down arrow, hit value settings. It says here's all of the things that you can summarize or do statistics on. I can do the count of the number of those, the average, the max, the min. Sum is what I want though. So I'm going to do sum of that, sum of that, sum of this, and I'll do a difference, why not? Sum of the difference here, and sum of the percent change doesn't make a lot of sense. So maybe that's the things that make the most sense right now. So then I come over here and it tells me how big my Main Street Central core is in terms of households in 2009 and 2010 and in 2040 plus. Now going back to the first part of this lesson, this shows how I organized those districts. So you can see right here that zones 180, 181, 190, and 191 are all colored purple like that. So if I go down to find them, I will see that they are part of, let's see if we can find 180, 181. Central core. It says that 180, 181 are central core, and also these two are central core. But that's kind of a hard way to see data sometimes, so let me show you about filters. Filters are really neat. So on the Data tab is this button called Filter. And what you want to do is kind of click on column D and say Filter. And what it does is puts a little drop down arrow here. So now it's already analyzed all of the things that are in column D and says, alright, this is the kind of data that you have in column D. How do you want to filter it? Do you want to select all or just some? So I want to select just some. So I'm going to see central core. I want to see what makes up central core. And it reduces the data. Because I have pictures on here, it kind of messes up my pictures a little bit because it's hiding. That's what it's doing, is if you can see over here, it is hidden all of the rows that weren't part of central core. So that's central core. So now I can change the filter and say, well, I really want to know what makes up the mountains. So I'm going to turn that on. This shows me the mountains. So that's a useful feature in Excel. Alright, so I'm going to go back now to select all, and I accidentally moved my picture all the way down to the bottom, so I'm just going to, well, I guess I can cut it. Control X cuts. I'll go to the top, click the cell where I want it, and Control V drops it back in the right place. Alright, so now we're back over here to the pivot tables again. And now I know that central core is pretty much just 4 zones right in the heart of downtown. And I could see that that it had 185 households. Now has 189 in the future. That some of the difference means it grew by 4.5 housing units. And my 2040 plus that I made myself had 274 housing units. Alright, so let's do the same thing for jobs now. You can go and reinsert pivot table the same way we did before, or you can just highlight this pivot table, Control C to copy it, put it over here, and hit Control V to paste it, and now you've got a duplicate of the same one. What we need to do though is change it to be not the houses that we are interested in summing. So you can just click those off, but instead it's the employment. And if you just click them on, usually they end up in the right place with the right thing, but not always, so you might have to fix that. But that's now showing employment. So now let's just take a look at central core. So this says that 2010 had 4,500 jobs. 2040 has 4,600 jobs. And I'll let you decide if that means whether downtown grew very much or not. And in my version, I grew it to 5,600 jobs. So I added roughly another 1,000 jobs above what's there right now. And that would be usually a 20% increase. But you can't do the average or the sum of the percent increases like we did over there for individual zones. So you have to do that separately. So let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to Control C, copy this, and then I'm going to paste values. So you can paste values by right clicking, and it has paste options up here. The little 1, 2, 3 button means values. So and usually I prefer to link data because it's easier to follow what's going on. But I'm going to now instead do paste values, and I'll just say paste values so that it's very clear to anyone, to myself in a month when I don't remember how I did this, and also to anybody else that you have to give this file to, that that's what you did. Alright, so let's look at percent change like we did before. I'm going to call this percent change, and I'm going to say I'm going to look at the 2040 over 2010, so that was the difference divided by the starting point, and it gives me that number right there, and if I put percent on it, that's the percent change. So I can see that my central core changed by 2%. I had 2% growth over a 30-year period in the number of housing units in the central core. Very small. There's another way to do percent change too, and let's do that and see if we get the very same thing. Sometimes you just do ratios. So you're going to say, I just want to see the sum of my employment here over the sum of the employment there. And I have a ratio. Notice that the ratio, the 0.53, looks like the same number as this. It's because it is. And so what you can do is you put a percent or parenthesis around this. You say -1, and then that gives you the same number you had before, and that if you turn that into percent, it's the same. So there's two ways to do percent change. One is the difference over the starting point, and the other one is just the ratio of one over the other -1, and that they both give you percent change. So now I'm going to label this percent change, or I'm going to call it just percent E40 E10, and that's all I need for that. Okay, so now I want to do the same thing for housing. I'm going to paste values below, but I'm going to end up getting really close to here, so I'm going to insert a row so that I don't do that. I'll take this data here and move it over to the right position over here, and now it's the right position but the wrong data. So all I need to do now is highlight the data that I want to copy. I'm going to Control C, copy that, and paste special, paste values, and it goes in there, and voila, it updates the data. I need to just confirm that it is correct, and it appears to be 2% housing growth as well as 2% employment growth in the central core. So that's not very impressive growth. That's very inconsistent with the Envision Cache scenario that they did. They tried to do a scenario where they grew the downtown and made it into a mixed-use center, and that's kind of the vision. But you can see right now, just from the little bit that we've done already, that the travel demand model that analyzes this information is going to analyze a city in which the downtown didn't grow much at all. It stayed very much exactly the same as it is right now. That is a flaw in the travel model, to the extent that anyone thinks that they're analyzing a downtown mixed-use growth scenario. They're actually analyzing a sprawl scenario, or at least it's a downtown no-growth scenario. That's what we know so far. Alright, so that's pretty important findings, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight in yellow. Well, that wasn't yellow. Let me see if I can get to yellow. I'm going to highlight in yellow numbers that I want to pay attention to later, that jump out at me and scream, wow, not right, or too big, too small, something like that. So let's look at some of these others and just think about that. So the southeast bench is an interesting place. It grows quite a bit. So it starts out with 5,000 houses, ends up with 10,000 houses. That's pretty big, and that's pretty big growth. The northeast bench is even quite a bit larger than that. I'm going to highlight those because they're really big numbers, and they're going to affect our Main Street assessment later. I'm not highlighting them because I think they're wrong. I'm not sure they're wrong. They actually look like they might be fine and might be right. But I am highlighting them because they're large and because the Main Street corridor is directly affected by what happens there. The mountains, this is a very high percent, but a relatively small number. So lots more people live in the mountains, but it really isn't all that many people when it's all said and done. So I don't care about that 500%. USU, the USU area grows by 2% in terms of number of houses, but 61% in terms of jobs. That's pretty impressive growth for the university. I'm going to highlight that one too. Good time to take a second and hit save on your file. Oh, and this is very dangerous. My file says .csv still, which means that I will lose all of the work that I have unless I save it as an Excel file. So I need to save it as an Excel workbook. I'm going to save it in the place where I'm organizing this class. Let's see, class analysis, and I'm going to call this output. It's not really output, but it's not output that we're starting with, and I'm going to call this TAZ analysis. That's fine.